Welcome here, Kurt Holman with you as we are in our episode number 3 of the VE Sports. It is going to be a fun one today, as a little bit later than usual. We're recording this Sunday morning, so it is going to be up to date with some Saturday scores from college football. Looking at some other things we got going on, we'll take a look at our picks for today's NFL action. And then the big news in the NBA, Damian Lillard is finally getting his trade to the Milwaukee Bucks. Kind of out of nowhere. We'll cover that a little bit towards the end of the show. But we're going to do a recap into some Pac-12 football and some big football games throughout this weekend and take a look at what is up to come next week. Is we have a full slate of college football and some rivalry action going on the way. Big one Friday night, Oregon State defeated Utah 21-7. The big player of the game for the Beavers was wide receiver Silas Bolden. He had a receiving and a rushing touchdown to win, and Damian Martinez also had a running touchdown in that matchup. Looking into that game, the big thing with Oregon State, and it was kind of that physical game you expected to see with Utah and Oregon State. They're very tough, they're very defensive heavy, and they like to run the ball. But as you can see with that matchup, it really came down to quarterback play. And the Beavers were able to pressure Utah, and they had to use 2 quarterbacks as well as injuring. Actually, both quarterbacks were pretty banged up there towards the end of the game. And with the Beavers able to put on a strong defensive matchup for them, especially coming after that Washington State loss, where, most of the game, Washington State was up by a couple touchdowns, and in the fourth quarter, the Beavers decided, hey, we're pretty good. Let's go ahead and play some football and make it a 3-point deficit in that final matchup. But Washington State's a tough team. We'll look into their matchup as well because they were on the bye week this weekend. So they have a tough one coming up next weekend. But again, recapping this Oregon State win, it was one they needed. They really needed, especially to keep themselves in a good spot in the polls and to keep them in contention with a possible Pac-12 title chance. A lot of things do have to go their way and able to get that opportunity, but that was a huge one at home against Utah to take care of business. And I think the biggest thing with Utah is Cam Rising going to be back this season? He was injured last season, recovered, was had surgery, and he was recovering all off season. And they're thinking, well, maybe by the first couple weeks of this season, he'd be ready to go. But he's back to doing training snaps. But apparently, there's something going wrong in that recovery that they haven't had. They haven't been able to figure out if he's going to be able to return this season, and possibly is his football career done. It's a very interesting case in Utah, and it's something they need to try to figure out. Do they need to build with some? They got some very inexperienced quarterback play, and getting them into some of these bigger matchups, especially down in this conference season, are they going to step up, able to deliver, and be able to provide? Because Utah's defense is the real deal, but the offense struggles, and Oregon State was able to capitalize in that matchup Friday night. Other big games happening yesterday: Washington 31, Arizona 24. Pretty close compared to how Washington's been playing this season, kind of lights out, able to move the ball around. Michael Penix Jr. still had another big game, going 30 for 40 with almost 400 yards through the air, but no touchdowns. Arizona was able to stop. I mean, they were picking apart the defense, but it was really the ground game of Washington able to punch in and get those scores. So Washington still probably one of the top teams in the nation, and by most people's accountability or by their recall, they say that Washington's probably in the top 3. But that game against Arizona starting to build up this in the conference season, and Washington still probably in that top 3 favorites in the Pac-12, especially, and it's really coming down to how is Michael Penix playing, or Michael Penix Jr., and how his play has been going. And so far, he's definitely one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. And if he's able to deliver on the big stage against upcoming matchups against Oregon, USC, Those are really the teams that Washington's going to have to win if they want to get into that top 4 at the end of the conference season. So it'll be a tough one, but Oregon's another tough team. Oregon, they started slow against Stanford. It was 14-6 at halftime, and then they were able to take care of business in the second half. 42-6 was the final in that matchup. And again, coming off the big win against Colorado the week before, able to take care of Stanford, which, again, talking about Stanford so far this season, at first half, they play pretty tough defensively. They're able to catch the Ducks off guard, but then with this Oregon team they're facing, they are just so deep in every position, and when you have Bo Nix able to sling the rock around and pick apart this defense once they find their rhythm, Ducks are tough to beat. Defensively, they're probably one of the top teams in the Pac-12. They are moving very well. They're able to get to the ball. They're able to make their tackles, and they create turnovers. So Oregon, again, top 3, I would say, in the Pac-12. If you're looking at it, you probably go Washington, Oregon, USC are those top 3 teams. And then Oregon State's right on the cusp, probably at 5, Washington State at 4. And so Pac-12 is still very deep, and they are still, again, with this season, they have, again, a final Pac-12 season, and we're still trying to hear what's going to happen with Washington State and Oregon State and how the Pac-2 is going to go on with its business starting next season. So hopefully we'll get some answers throughout the next coming weeks that will tell us what direction they're going. But in this Pac-12 season, this is big for these 3 teams. They're going to have to duke it out. But with how they're ranked and how their ratings have been going, whoever probably wins in this conference, they will get a spot in that Big 4 and opportunity for a national championship. Other matchups, USC 48, Colorado 41. And USC was up big at halftime. And Colorado able to come back after some misplays by USC. And that third quarter really got the rhythm going. They were at home, so once they got some momentum, they were able to take care of it. But that was a big game. After dropping a big loss to Oregon the week before, and then it looked like USC was going to blow out Colorado by halftime, it was a big momentum shift for this team where they've had some big injuries, and they're looking to look healthier in the next coming weeks. But with Colorado, it's how are they able to go throughout this conference, and the big thing for them, are they going to be able to get a bowl game? And so I think if you're able to get a bowl game with Colorado this season, that would be a win in itself. And for Deion Sanders' first year here, and before they go to the Big 12 next year, how's that going to help with recruiting? Because, again, I think Deion's going to be probably one of the biggest recruiters in college football. I think it's already shown that he was able to recruit some top players down to Jackson State, and able to now, on a bigger stage where you got some facilities, you're able to get some name power. Hey, we're playing in the Big 12. You get some big opportunities, big game matchups. That's going to help. But just Deion being Deion, he's going to recruit players, and people are going to want to play for him. Now, we'll see how this season impacts their recruiting, but so far, they've done well in that case. And then last matchup, looking at it in Pac-12, we had California, Arizona State, probably 2 of the lower seeded teams in the Pac-12. California won that one 24-21. Other matchups, and there were some wild ones yesterday. Looking at it, there were a lot of big score matchups, especially that Ole Miss LSU game going into OT. And Ole Miss able to squeak out and the upset 55-49 over LSU, where LSU offensively, they were doing pretty well. and both teams offensively. But when you have games like that, especially in the SEC, which is more so known for being defensive heavy, defensive stars, balanced, usually maybe one-sided if you looked at these teams, but how they were both able to attack the defense and put points up. It's kind of uncharacteristic for SEC matchups. Usually you'll see this more in the Big 12, but it was definitely a fun game to tune into. But yeah, big win for Ole Miss. And then number 1, Georgia squeaked by Auburn. And Auburn played pretty tough. And at some points in the game, getting into the fourth quarter, it was tied at 17. So both teams were able to score. And Georgia, again, Georgia's number 1. They've been tested this season, and by teams you wouldn't expect be those teams to test them. But it shows the depth of this SEC conference, and Georgia, they've got the talent. Don't sleep on them. Don't say, well, they barely won this game here. I think a lot of the teams are a lot closer in this season than last season, especially within these top teams. I don't think there's a clear-cut number 1. Georgia at the moment is, but between the top probably 8 teams, whoever has a better day is going to win that game. There's a lot of talent, and so I think it's a lot more comparable than last season when Georgia kind of ran the tables. I think it's a little bit closer this year because you got a lot of teams that are able to score the ball. They're able to score. They've got some good defense and have those balanced attacks. That'll be interesting to see as we go through these conference matchups and get closer to bowl season. But that was a big one for Georgia, and we'll see if that affects them in the their AP polls, which will come out later today. Another big matchup, Notre Dame 21, Duke 14. Now this game score-wise seems close, but the Notre Dame, how they played in the first half, other than a missed field goal and some opportunities missed, they were able to move the ball at will against Duke. And when you hear Duke football, you don't think of them as being like a ranked or a top team. Usually it would be basketball, and that's kind of about it. But they've been playing very well this season. And that was a home game where they had some opportunity, especially in the second half. But Notre Dame's a tough team, and Duke able to keep this one close with an opportunity to win. This kind of shows that they are taking steps in the right direction. And we're looking forward to kind of an interesting matchup later in the season when they play UNC. UNC is another top team, or another very good team this year. And so it's interesting talking about how big a matchup in football is between UNC and Duke, when usually it's basketball is what we would talk about in that rivalry. So I'm excited about that one as we look forward to it in the next couple of weeks. And then our other last game, and this is the big upset, and I don't know if you consider it an upset in how Kentucky's been playing, and I think it's more so that they're just kind of waiting for a breakout game for them, and Florida was definitely that. So Kentucky improves to 5-0. They win against Florida 33-14, where Florida pretty much manhandled Tennessee 2 weeks ago. That's what Kentucky did to Florida. And because Florida came in here ranked in the top 25 after that Tennessee win, and now Kentucky, you're going to look at jumping in the top 25 with a big day by running back Ray Davis. He ran for 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. And when you're able to do that, especially against an SEC defense like Florida, that makes a huge impact on their season. And they're going to be looking into, we have them in our other big matchup for next weekend, which is going to be fun because, again, we got some rivalry games coming up that are going to get wild. And that's the best part about college football. And more so, I would say more so this year, next year, it's going to be different with how the whole college layout and all these teams move into these different conferences. All these rivalry games that we're used to and that we've grown up with, they're essentially going away. you'll have a few here and there, but a lot of these matchups are just they'll still play each other, but it just won't have the same feel. And college football, that's what draws me into it so much. Is I love the rivalry. I love the teams going back and forth, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Growing up as a Beaver fan, it was always Beavers versus Ducks. Next year, they'll try to keep that, but it's not going to feel the same. It's not going to be a conference. Some of those games determined the conference. Who is going to go to Rose Bowl? Who's not? And so these rivalry games, they're huge this season because next season they essentially are watered down and just don't feel the same. So we'll see how those go, but yeah, I'm gonna miss how these conference rivalries. Really, this is the last season that they're gonna have that kind of feel to them. But again, our matchups for next week, we'll go through our picks. Oregon State at California. We're gonna take the Beavers on the road. They're a little shaky at times, but I think that was a huge win against Utah to really cement their identity and being that defensive and run team. I think for Oregon State, quarterback-wise, DJ is really just going to have to be able to run the ball. He can make big passes here and there, but the strength of that Oregon State offense is running the ball and using their creativeness to get rushing lanes. And, between Silas Bolden with his sweeps, Damian Martinez, Deshaun Fenwick with his power run, and then using DJ to use that option play is huge for Oregon State because he's a big quarterback and he can run with a lot of power and a lot of speed, and he can pick up quick yards when they need it. So for Oregon State, I think the big thing is just keep the ball on the ground, rush, get some big running yards, and then that'll open up the play action is really the strength. And then defensively, again, Washington State was a tough team defensively because you get Cam Ward, who's probably one of the top players in the country, especially one of the top dual threat players. But they were able to show up at home against Utah and really just out physical, which is hard to see people being more physical than Utah. They are probably one of the most physical teams in the country with the last 10 years. And Oregon State, that's their identity. Defensively, we're going to be physical. We're going to punch you right in the mouth, and we're going to force you to make hard plays to beat us. And so I think they'll be able to take care of business at California. Other matchups, Washington State at UCLA. We'll take the Cougars in that matchup. Kind of the same thing. It really depends offensively on how Cam Ward's playing. And if he can keep up the play that he's been going at right now, Washington State's going to be a tough team to beat. And so on the road, I think they don't have an issue so much. I think that Cam Ward's going to dictate the game. And if he plays like he normally does, they'll be in a good spot there to win that one. Arizona at USC. Again, Arizona able to keep up with Washington yesterday. And now they're going to be on the road against the Trojans. Trojans offense, they can score. Defensively, they're not as sound as they have been in the past, but when you can put up 45 to 50 points a game at will, it makes it a little bit easier on that defense. So I'll take USC in that home matchup against Arizona. Colorado at Arizona State. We'll take the Buffaloes in that matchup to get a win against Arizona State, who's been struggling this season. And I think Colorado, they really need a boost. This will be a game that they need to win in order to have a chance to get into that bowl season with some other big games coming up. It's going to be tough, but these matchups against some of the lower teams in the Pac-12, you have to win them if you want to have a chance at the end of the season to play in the postseason. So I'll take the Buffaloes in that game. Other matchups. It is Red River rivalry time. The big rivalry game between Texas and Oklahoma. And this season, it is bigger than usual as there could be some top four implications on the line, especially in the case of Texas, who sits in at number 3 into, we'll see in the polls, but they'll probably stay at 3 heading into that matchup. And against this Sooner offense that's been putting up points offense or through the air and on the ground. So I think it's going to be a offensive matchup. Defensively, I think that they're going to give up points. I think Texas defensively is a little bit better than Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is explosive on offense. They're able to move the ball at will, but it is very tough against this Texas defense. And Texas, on the other hand, they've got a strong offense. So I think it'll be an offensive matchup, and really whoever has the ball at the end, who's able to make those big plays, that's who's going to take the matchup. And I'm going to pick probably with it can go either way. I think this is more of a 50-50 match. And looking at ESPN, it looked like that more people were choosing Oklahoma, but that win against Alabama on the road was very impressive to see this Texas team do that. And so with that, and again, there isn't really a home team in this matchup since they're so close to each other, and you're going to have fans. It's going to be a packed house with fans from both teams. But I will choose Texas in this game. I just think they'll squeak it by. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a lot of points, but I would probably say Texas by a field goal at the end. So I will take the Longhorns in that matchup. Maryland at Ohio State. Maryland's going to be a tough task for the Buckeyes. Again, the Buckeyes had their big win against Notre Dame, and I think the Buckeyes will be able to take care of business at home against Maryland. And so that'll be another fun game coming up next Saturday. Missouri hosting LSU. Missouri comes into that game. Again, there's a lot of undefeated teams heading into this matchup, and LSU, after 2 losses, it's really a make or break game for the Tigers, for them to either continue their season and try to get that chance where they can play in Alabama and get an upset there, and possibly play at Georgia and get an upset there and keep their season alive and their playoff hopes. So you've got to take care of business, especially when it's games like this that can make or break your season. So with that being said, I will take LSU on the road. I think offensively with Jaden Daniels and the way he's able to carry this offense, he's gonna be the guy that has to have a big game and make the plays for LSU to win. And I think he'll just be able to do enough to get the victory there. Other matchups: Alabama, Texas A&M. Now, we were talking about that Alabama team with the loss against Texas, and then they're going to have some big matchups at the SEC later this year. They're going to get Texas A&M on the road, and I am going to choose A&M in this case. I think Alabama has been struggling at times, and really it's the pass defense. They're giving up almost 190 yards a game, which is kind of uncharacteristic for Alabama. Run defense has been good. Pass defense a little shaky. Just a lot of new guys on that team. And so it's another game that really for them, they're either going to have to win or to lose it. And their playoff hopes, I think, is on the line in this matchup, especially if that loss against Texas. And Texas A&M, they're playing well right now. They're 4-1, and they're at home. Defense is playing well. Their run defense is holding under 100 yards a game, and their pass defense is playing pretty well as well. So I think it's going to be a defensive matchup, not a lot of points, and I think Texas A&M will be able to do the job at home and take care of the Crimson Tide. Kentucky at Georgia. This is a huge game because Kentucky's coming in as the big underdog, but at 5-0 against a Georgia team that is playing not up to their standards, I would say, because when you see Georgia, you're used to them kind of just running up, able to really pass the ball, run the ball. They're able to get whatever they want and win games, and very comfortably win games. But against this Kentucky team, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I think it's close, but I will think that Georgia is able to take care of business at home. And that's really the deciding factor. If it was Kentucky at home, I would probably lean more to the Wildcats in that case. But since they're on the road against Georgia at home, Georgia's very tough on the road, but at home they're just as good. So I will take Georgia in that matchup. And then our last two last two games that we were looking at for next week, Notre Dame at LSU. Notre Dame's been playing very well. They had a big win against Duke on the road, and they just got beat out on the last play by Ohio State 2 weeks ago. But I think Notre Dame it feels different with what Marcus Freeman's been able to do as head coach with this team. They seem to have kind of a different feel where they're good all season, but in the big games, it feels like they don't have enough. They don't have the talent, or they just don't play like they want to. But this year, I think they are starting to execute well, especially in bigger games. And so at Louisville's a very tough team, but I think Notre Dame's able to take care of business on the road. And then our final matchup, and this isn't more so of, this is kind of looking into some of these Midwest teams or these Mountain West teams that will again, looking into how the Big Two with Washington State, Oregon State, and what happens next year, but some Mountain West action. And you have number 25, Fresno State on the road against Wyoming. Fresno State undefeated, Wyoming 4-1. I think Fresno State is able to get the win on the road against Wyoming. Again, Wyoming had that big comeback win against Texas Tech early in the season. And I just think that Fresno State has been they've been performing very well. They've been able to execute when they need to. And so very tough team, but I think Fresno State will take care of business on the road against Wyoming. Now looking into the NFL, we'll just go through some scores that happened last week, and we'll go through how our picks did. San Francisco 30, New York Giants 12, Indianapolis 22, Baltimore 19, Cleveland 27, Tennessee 3. I think the big game everybody was talking about was that Miami-Denver game, just because Miami was able to put up 70 points on the Broncos. Again, Miami 70, Denver 20. New England 15, the Jets 10. Buffalo 37, Washington 3. Detroit 20, Atlanta 6. Green Bay comes back, able to score 18 points in the second half to erase the 17-point deficit at halftime. They win at 18-17 against New Orleans. Houston 37, Jacksonville 17. The Chargers 28, Vikings 24. Seahawks able to win a big one against the Carolina Panthers 37-27. Arizona 26, Dallas 16. Kansas City 41, Chicago 10. Pittsburgh 23, the Raiders 18. Philadelphia 25, Tampa Bay 11, and Cincinnati 19, the Los Angeles Rams 16. Looking at how our picks did, we went 10-5, which is one better than the week before. I think the big one that was shocking to me was the Houston-Jacksonville game. Feels like Jacksonville was playing pretty well this season, but against a Houston team, C.J. Stroud, he's been definitely playing up to the hype at quarterback, and he had a big game for them. And so it's nice to see Houston finally get something in return with the success of C.J. Stroud early in the season, especially as a rookie quarterback taking over that offense. So it'll be fun to see how he does throughout the season. Looking at our matchups today, again, matchups are going to start shortly, so we'll just make our picks. Miami, and we're not going to do the early morning game in London this morning because it's going as it is and probably almost over. But Miami at Buffalo, we're going to take Buffalo. Denver at Chicago, we'll take. In that game, it's kind of a lose-lose situation. You can kind of choose who you want. It's going to be a rough game to watch. But we'll take the Bears at home. Baltimore at Cleveland, we'll take the Browns. Pittsburgh at Houston, we are going to take Pittsburgh in that matchup. Minnesota at Carolina, I think Minnesota is due for a win, so I will take the Vikings. The Rams at the Colts, we'll take the Rams. Tampa Bay at New Orleans, we will take New Orleans at home. Washington at Philadelphia. You got to roll with the Eagles, especially at home. Cincinnati at Tennessee. We'll take the road dogs and the Bengals. Las Vegas at the Chargers. We will take the Chargers at home. New England at Dallas. I think Dallas was able to bounce back. Again, defensive matchup. There aren't going to be a lot of points scored, but we'll take the Cowboys in that game. Arizona, San Francisco. We'll take the 49ers at home. Kansas City and the Jets will take the Chiefs. And Monday night action, Seattle at New York against the Giants. We will take the Seahawks. So those are our picks for next weekend's games. And then our finishing topic of this episode in the NBA, Damian Lillard has been traded. News broke earlier this week. And if you're not a basketball fan and haven't heard it now, again, it kind of took over the storm because, again, between how long this trade and really shocking on how this trade has gone down, where you thought the whole time the whole point was to get Lillard to his preferred destination in the Heat, but he is going to the Milwaukee Bucks, which I think is a better team in this case. And I think Milwaukee is actually a little bit more desperate than Miami, in which they were ready to let go of some big assets on the team, especially incorporating the Phoenix Suns in this, because I think the Blazers got a really good return. But the big thing was they needed a player to join Giannis. And I think more so than ever, the point was to keep Giannis in Milwaukee and to say, hey, we want you to stay here. We want you to finish, and we're going to put up some players that we're hoping can put us in a chance to win the NBA championship next season. And so they were able to bring in Damian Lillard, which I think is going to boost up their offense in that one. I think defensively they're not going to be as good because they did let go of Jrue Holiday, who is probably one of the top perimeter defensive players in the NBA. But with Lillard, I mean, you're getting a guy who's a walking bucket. And so that's a big offensive weapon for the Bucks. And when you got Damian Lillard and Giannis and Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, they're going to put up some points. So they're going to be tough, especially once they get into the playoffs. But again, looking at the return for the Portland Trailblazers, they are able to get guard Jrue Holiday, center DeAndre Ayton, Toumani Camara, and then they were getting the unprotected first-round pick of 2029 from the Bucks. And then they have the swap rights of the Bucks picks in 2028 and 2030. The big name, I think, in that is, well, there's two things. I think Jrue Holiday, number one, because the Portland Trailblazers are going to trade him. I feel like that is the main rule that they got because there's a lot of teams that are interested in Jrue Holiday, and he is a star. He a little bit of an older guy, but defensively, he's probably one of the top perimeter defenders in the NBA, and he can still make baskets. So he's definitely a person that can fit on a lot of these teams. And Portland's more so, especially with Scoot Henderson at point guard and Shaedon Sharpe and Anthony Simons. That is going to be the backcourt. Jrue Holiday essentially was incorporated in this trade for money sense and for a trading piece for the Blazers to get more into this young team, because I think the second part of the big thing was DeAndre Ayton. Now you have a pretty young center who's been playing, probably one of the better and probably one of the top centers in the NBA, especially for Phoenix. You got a star center in DeAndre Ayton, and I think it's really good for him to get kind of a change of scenery. He started out with Phoenix, played really well, but then it seemed like there was just a disconnect between the organization and him. And I know Portland has a bad record with centers in the NBA, especially good centers. And so we're praying that there aren't any injuries coming up for DeAndre Ayton, because again, you look at the past record of big men in Portland and injuries are in the future. But hopefully DeAndre Ayton, especially at like 25 years old, he's young enough. He'll be a very big player for the Blazers. Definitely a 1 or 2 option for this, and you pair him with Scoot Henderson, who I think now you're looking, okay, this is Scoot's team. Even as a rookie, he's well-disciplined. He's a scorer. He's a guy that can take over a game. And now you got a big man who can get the boards and be a very big, low-key presence for the Blazers. And then the Phoenix Suns, they are able to get Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. So a good pickup there for the Suns. But really, in this case, it was what can Portland, how do you get a package that's big enough to trade for Damian Lillard? And so they had to add that second team with them. And again, out of it, Miami is completely shut out the door. Now, Miami could trade a good return for the Blazers for Jrue Holiday. And there's a lot of teams that I think are making that phone call to Portland for him. And again, that was the intention. You get Jrue Holiday and you can flip him for some picks and a good young player. And so we'll see what they're able to get for him, because I don't think he'll be in Portland for very long. I think that was the main reason to get him traded, is money's sake, to get Lillard and open a spot for Lillard essentially with the Bucks, but a chance to get a good return from another star player in Jrue Holiday. So you can turn trading Lillard and Jrue Holiday into essentially a mini fortune of draft picks and young talent for this rebuilding Blazer basketball team. So it'll be fun to see how they do this next year and what's going to be the turnout of this. But I think it's a very good direction for Portland, in which, and then also, what does that mean for Jeremy Grant for the Blazers? Because he just renewed his contract, and I think that's a player that Portland is going to look to trade. That would, in my mind, make sense, because you can get, he's a forward. He's probably one of the top forwards if in the NBA. So you can get a really good return for him as well. And so you're flipping three players into essentially a new team and picks and future. You got a lot of assets, which in the last couple of years, they've had tough times with their contracts they've made. And now with new ownership, it is very interesting to see what's up with Portland and how they're able to make do with all these big trades that they're making. With Lillard the first, Holiday most likely the second, and then Jeremy Grant, especially since he's got a 4-year deal. Teams are like, okay, well, if we trade for him, we can trade for him, and we'll get him for a few years, especially if we think we have a chance to run for the NBA playoffs and get a championship. So that'll be a matchup we will, or that'll be a trade that we will look at, unless Jeremy Grant decides, hey, you know what? I think this young group's going to be a good core. Might be a year, but I might stick around and see if we can do. I doubt it. That doesn't seem probable in my mind, especially with some guy who's getting close to 30 and kind of in his prime. I think the smart move would be to look for trades for him, especially now that teams know that he's wrapped up for 4 years. That makes it easier than a 1-year deal where they'd essentially have to trade it and then say, if we trade for you this much, we need you to sign a deal. The deal's already in place. So that makes it a little bit easier. Well, again, a lot of sports happening this weekend. A lot of sports coming up next week. We'll look for some big college football games, some NFL games, and then we'll see what's happening in the sports world. You guys stay safe. Have a great weekend. You've been listening to VE Sports.